Yesterday I was on a construction tour, and I saw a couple of former students. One wasn't actually in my studio, but was in the year level of the other student that was. And so we just got to kind of talking after the tour was over. What did you like about the tour? Was there anything interesting about it? I even kind of lamented, it was just like, these are the kind of things that I would love to be able to do more often in studio, is to take students to see construction tours, to kind of understand the complexities of all of the things that we keep asking them to put in in their projects, so that they understand the complexities of buildings and all that other stuff. And so as we kept talking and stuff, and I was listening to them talk about like what they liked and didn't like about the building that we were looking at, I had asked them, well, where are you all working? Or how are you enjoying the profession? Because these were students from my very first semester of teaching. So they've already graduated with their master's degree, and they are now officially 100% in the profession. No more school, no more nothing.
Emerging professionals.
And I'm getting to the question. But I needed to set the stage. How did you know
what I was thinking, Cormac?
I needed to set the stage. And so the one person who was in my studio, this was like, I'm really enjoying it. I'm learning a lot. I kind of enjoy doing this. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Then there was a guy with them that was basically their year level, new emerging professional. And he was, again, I didn't know him, but he kind of offered up his opinion about it. Then I got to the other person who was from the university. She said she hates everything about it, hated it when she was in school and everybody, but she was a really good student. Let me just preface it all by
you're
good
basically
student.
Explaining my wife. Like, this was her experience as well. Really good student, hated school, hated everything about it,
and hates the profession.
Uh-huh.
And so the question is, and since you have firsthand knowledge of this and experience from inside the calls coming from inside the house.
Yeah, right.
What do you do? Now, I've had this experience with a couple of other young emerging professionals that I've worked with in the past. What do you do when you've gone through 5 years of school, 6 years of school in their case, and you didn't like it when you were in school, but you thought, as everybody told you, oh, don't worry, the profession is going to be a whole lot different. You'll like it when you're out in the profession. And then you get into the profession and you're like, nope, I really don't like it here either. And I dug a little bit deeper, and I was just like, we were standing in downtown Detroit, and there's, a whole gamut of different types of architecture. Some nice turn of the century, beautifully detailed architecture. There's the new building that we were just leaving, and then everywhere in between. And I was just, look at this. She's like, yeah, there's nothing speaking to me. It is falling on deaf ears to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What do you do? Now, I offered up some advice, and we could talk about that as we go along, but what do you do if you've gone through all of that schooling and you just don't like what you chose to do? That's the question.
I don't think that this is abnormal, and I don't think it should be labeled as such.
It's absolutely not. I totally agree with you.
There's so many things you could do because,
as you probably were about to say, and what I told her was it was like, you would not believe the multitude of different things that you can do inside and outside of the profession with this degree. That does not mean that you have to follow the traditional path of architects.
So, I mean, one of the most concerning things is with your follow-up, right? Which is like, none of this is speaking to me. And I think you kind of have to get into some stuff to see if it speaks to you, rather than just judge it all from the surface, right?
Right.
And because I think extra weight could be putting into the feeling of the situation based on current environment and context. And so if there's really kind of you wake up and you have this kind of sense of dread about going to work that day. That's very different than the architecture around me isn't speaking to me in any way, right? Like those are two very different things. And I think both of those could be addressed. Like I'm not trying to minimize the way the person's feeling because you do have to sit, you have to go inside and be like, okay, where is that feeling in me? And then try to figure out why it's there. And I think the only way you can do that is have that really honest conversation with yourself. And the point isn't to your point to say, start over, because maybe that's not an option.
No.
And so I think it could become an option at some point, but I don't think that's the immediate answer, which is like, go do something else completely.
Yeah. Well, I think some of her friends, in fact, one of the other student, she had thought that was the course of action that she had to take. Is like, oh my God, you just finished, 6 years of school, you've got your master's degree now, and you're going to have to just start all over again. And I was like, not necessarily. I mean, there are so many things that a degree in architecture, a multitude of different doors can be opened, and it's just gaining experience, gaining, and I told her, I was like, one of the great things about both in the profession, in school, going to, as we said a couple of episodes ago, when you go to these conferences and stuff and you meet a bunch of people, and so you're building this network. I mean, you can network out and find other things. And of course, some of the things that I told her is like, you've got to listen to X podcasts and Y podcasts, one X being Troxel and Y actually being out of architecture. And go and like listen to these, because there's a lot of people on your other podcasts that were in the profession that found a life outside of the direct profession that still are having impacts on the profession that you couldn't do if you were just a regular architect. It doesn't sound right, but anyway, just a regular architect. And then there's others. There's like, okay, well, maybe you don't necessarily want to be in the AEC industry, but you've got this degree. What do you want? What can you do?
And there's so many adjacents. There's so many adjacents, like real estate, like interior design.
Right.
There's a lot of options, I think, when it comes to working in and around the built environment, where you would be bringing that expertise that you got in school to a different point of view, and you would actually be adding something there rather than being one of the same kind of points of view within that sphere of influence.
I asked them yesterday, and this is how I kind of got to some other, kind of just pulling more information out of her. It's just like, were you ever, I was like, did you ever ask yourself, or were you asked? Because I did this, last semester with my younger students. I asked them, why architecture? It's like, this is not an easy profession. This is not, like something that you just choose, randomly or something.
Oh my gosh, dude, I just got off a phone call yesterday with somebody who's been in it for a long time, who is very disenfranchised. So good to ask those questions early.
Oh yeah. And ask the question, I mean, is this the path you want to go on? And, and it's actually, to be quite honest with you, this is probably the best time for her to be asking herself that question,
If you can have asked it before, if you never asked it before, right? So the next best time is now.
The next best time is now. And I can say that, there's plenty of times when people, would say, why architecture to me? And I'm just like, how long do you have? I can give
part of it is, I mean, I could ask the questions like, well, like what is it that really, so it started in school, but now, like, what's keeping it that way?
Right.
Because it could be the people you work with. It could be the kinds of projects you're on. It could be the culture of the office. There's variable upon variable here.
Yeah. And all of that is, the more and more I get into architecture, and the more and more I get exposed to things outside of and architecturally adjacent and stuff, the more and more it kind of just reaffirms that this is what I want to do, but it is also one of those things that I sought out and looked towards getting into, looked forward to getting into, thrived when I was in school, and felt like, I've, pretty well thrived in one way, shape, or form since I've been out. Now, that means that, I've always been asking that question. And for somebody like her, or even like your wife, that they asked the question, or they hadn't asked the question, but then they got into the profession, said, whoa, this is not quite what I want to do.
When I felt that seriously, the last time I really felt this was during the ARE process.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it at that point for me. And I did it anyway.
What's funny though is, like, think about when you took the AREs and think about when I took the AREs, and how far out of school we were when we actually finally got around to doing that. And then to say, oh man, should I really be doing this? Like, or do I want to really do this? It's just kind of, it struck me as an interesting, just kind of like, question to ask, is like, really, in a way, I'd love to just ask everybody, why architecture? Because again, like, if you're, I always promised myself, and I think I've told this story before, there was this guy when in my very, very first internship, and I would come into work, here I am, the intern, old bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like, just, here, let's go into the world and create. This guy complained every single solitary day. It was explicative this, explicative that. I mean,
just
everything.
Bad attitude.
It was just a bad attitude. And it wasn't like, look, I've had bad days or a bad project or a bad client where, I may complain about it, but projects come and go, clients come and go, just that bad day comes and goes, and you just move on, and it's just like, well, sometimes we absolutely ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Why do I put myself through this? And then there's
because things are hard, right? Like, life is hard, work is hard, and you are put in that position because it's not the ideal state.
And so how many times do you and I then figure out a way or a time or a place or whatever to say, oh yeah, this is why I do this. Whether it's a reaction from a client, or you go into a building and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Or
those are farther and fewer between though, right? Like, those are the punctuation in the sentences.
I mean, to me, I absolutely love going into, the university and go into the architecture studio and just see all of these, the ambition and the drive and the love for getting into the new challenge and seeing the looks on their face. And so I've got something to invigorate me in the teaching aspect of things. But I'm just
for a regular architect, that might be the next project or a new client or a pursuit, and so I think there is kind of this striving for what's next and better, and seeing the possibility. I really don't think you're gonna thrive in architecture unless you're an optimist in that way.
Yeah,
I feel like true thriving, like what the sense I'm getting from you and your attitude is through this striving for better. What's that next thing? What's the thing that's going to that is really going to fuel me energetically, so that I can look forward to whatever that is. But then there is a real calling out of the day to day. There are things that are just extremely challenging and difficult, but also makes it worth it. Like, when you accomplish through that accomplishment of doing those hard things.
Right. You said striving, and then of course I just thought of, the little Netflix Formula One thing. I was just like, thriving to survive, or thrive to survive.
You need a good tagline. We need marketing taglines to make it through. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, okay. So just to go back to my better half's situation, she's never solved this issue. Hasn't. There's definitely things that she's passionate about that are outside of architecture. And there's also this very real, like, I spent a lot of money on this. Like, I am in a lot of debt because of this decision. But like the example you're sharing, didn't like it during school. Like, had a different idea of what it was versus the reality of what it was. Learned that through school, stuck with it because she's not a quitter. And like, just it actually zaps her energy. It actually sucks it out. It's like it leaves her lifeless in that way. And she hasn't found a recipe for happiness in it at all, and would rather do anything but this, right? And so she's not doing it. And I would also make the case that I think you have to put in some due diligence into this to see. I really like your idea about the Out of Architecture podcast and the community there, because the education is so useful in so many other ways. And at the same time, like you put in that due diligence, and literally, if you can't find any redeeming qualities, do not do it. Do not put your life into a thing that sucks your energy and zaps you. And because how are you going to be a great contributing citizen if that's the state that you're in all the time?
Because I was thinking, and as I was telling my wife this, and we were talking about it, it's just like, you do all of this, and then you go into work every day, and you absolutely hate it, and you don't like what you're doing, and so you're obviously not doing any good for yourself, good for your emotional well-being.
Probably. Yeah.
But then there's that. Then there's you're not doing good for the project, good for the client, good for the team around you. You know what I mean? You may come in and try to be as positive as possible, but that feeling is going to leach out of you. And, the just like, I can't believe I'm still here.
Can we just talk about how important attitude is? And I am not just talking about architecture. I mean, in all situations. There are so many times, especially recently as this has just become more and more apparent to me, when I see a bad attitude, it literally... I hate to actually use even the literally word. It's so overused. But it's like one of those things where it's like a guarantee every time. Yeah. Oh, that just drained me dealing with that person.
And exactly. It's
a complete opposite when it's a good attitude.
Like their negative attitude. So I'll give you a couple of examples of just this. And I mention this to my kids every time. Let's just say we go through a drive-through and we're ordering food. And
the difference of a good somebody there is stark.
Exactly. It's just like if you get, if you like go through and you just have this angry attitude that comes across the speaker, and you just, what do you want? And, whatever it is. And
what do you want?
And then you go to another place and I'll say that, I think it's company policy, whether they
Chick-fil-A.
are fighting through Chick-fil-A.
I'm calling it.
That, that they are positive and chipper and cheery, and they thank you.
I wonder how much of the hiring process is based on attitude alone.
You know what? But I always tell my kids, like, you got to understand, you choose the job. They didn't choose. I mean, yes, they hired you, they interviewed you, but you choose the job. So you should just go. You chose to, apply to this job, get this job, do this job. So do it as best as you can. Come in with a good attitude and just do it. Even if you don't like it, you chose to do it. If you choose that you don't want to do it, then, we're right back to where we, started this conversation. Then, it's your decision to figure out what to do next.
So in the studio, I have worked with people with a bad attitude, and what I would call there's a black rain cloud hovering over them, right? And so there's a shadow on my face right here. See how that is contagious, because it's like, okay, if I can get somebody else commiserating with me, okay, now it's two, and now it's
just
yes, it does. It grows. It grows, and then it becomes like, well, this is the normal culture of the studio, which is at some point it becomes, everybody's complaining about stuff all the time, and it's amazing when either that is removed from the equation or we become very aware of it to make a change about it. How much things shift and how fast they shift in a different direction.
Right.
Have you seen that in studios too, or even in school? Like in school, where you've got a bunch of students, and if you've got one, like I bet you can. So the studios
that I've been involved with in school, they're typically group projects, and that is, this is their introduction to working in teams, and the first semester that I was working there, and I think a few friends of the show that, one of them I know for a fact listens, will, and teaches with me, will attest to the fact that it was a horrible semester. There were teams that worked great, and even if there was maybe one or two people within that team that wasn't terribly strong, they were, the team kind of like gathered around them to help them, and it was just a positive energy within the team. Then there were other teams that they were just fought like cats and dogs, and we're always arguing. And even in our reviews, when we would just sit down and talk about architecture, this was their idea and none of us really like it. And so we just let them go ahead and do it, but now we're stuck with this. And then it was just like, and then they just start bickering back and forth. It's like, well, if you could do it, then you should have done it. But since nobody was doing it, I did it. It was just this weird like negativity.
You just watch it.
And
grow.
you just watch it. And we, and no matter how much we tried to like teach through that, or try to explain to them about like teamwork within the profession, and how even if you don't maybe have like the strongest of team members, keeping a positive energy around it is you definitely get used to it. I think we can safely say no one is going to be as good as you are on in your mind.
In your mind.
I mean, just plain say, I can't believe they did that. I wouldn't have done that. I mean, how many times has everybody said that about somebody else when they're doing group work or stuff? And instead of using it as a learning opportunity to say, okay, they may not know exactly everything that I want, that I need them to know. Okay, well, then this is an opportunity to teach them. Or they don't do it the way that I do it. Okay, well, if you want a certain outcome, guess what you got to do? You've got to teach them. I mean, it's all of these opportunities to mentor, to help people grow, to, or maybe, just maybe, put down your ego for a little while and say, okay, this is the way that I wanted it to be done, but I see that you're doing it this way. And you know what? It's not a bad way to do it, and it might be easier. Learn something from somebody else.
I am almost certain that an ego has never helped a situation ever.
Almost certain. Almost every condition.
What's the saying? The saying is like, you're only as smart as like your five closest, confidants, friends, whatever you want to say. So it's be careful who you surround yourself with. And
cool.
In a way that the thing that I think that starts to point to, which is this is not a new idea, is that you want to be the dumbest one in the room. You don't want to be seen as even the smartest one in the room, right? Because then what do you have to learn? And so if you're going into a situation where, okay, I'm going to surround my people with something I strive to become in some way. There's some characteristic or some trait in that situation. And so when you're looking for a job, or you're looking for a team, or when you're trying to assemble that team to accomplish a certain task, that's what you want to strive for, if at all possible. You don't always have control over that, but you then need to look for those opportunities in that situation to be the one who is willing to always be learning, and never the person that says, I've got all the answers. I mean, that's one of the things about being an architect that I think really shifted for me at some point, which was, I think at some level, clients expect you to have a lot of answers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, you have to be willing to say, I don't know. I'm going to find out.
Right.
And I think that applies on the day-to-day in your work team as well, or in your school team.
Now, how hard is that for an architect, though? And
it's really hard because
in your experience,
you've been trained. Yeah. You have been trained to do it all yourself, and to have all the answers and the justifications and the reasons and for sure. It is hard.
It's like, have you thought about this? Of course I have. Or do you know this? Of course I do. Or,
I'm going to make something up right now.
Or can you do this? Of course I can. And it's like,
there's positive traits to that too. There's positive outcomes to that. Like, oh, can you do this? I've never done that before, but yeah, I'm willing to try, right? And being honest. But part of it is really being self-aware and saying,
oh yeah, yeah.
Like, is this ego really serving me?
Right.
Or is it just
right.
pissing people off and making me look like an a-hole?
Yeah.
That's more often
yeah.
the case.
In you were talking about developing a team and what you look for. I mean, everybody, including the project managers or the project executive or whoever is the leadership of the project, everybody should be coming into that as an eager sponge, if I can get it out. It's everybody's one. What is the opportunity that we have in front of us? What can we all learn together? I'm always asking people at the beginning of a project, what do you want to get out of this project? What do you personally want to get out of this project? Some people, they're early in their career and they want to learn, like, hey, I'd like to learn exterior detailing, or I may have, I've never done, program planning before. And so, I want to kind of maybe work with the program and see how that all lays out and all of that other stuff and learn how to do that.
I think you mean the schedule, Cormac.
I see what you did. Well done. But I mean, and so, you've got, you like everybody should have like an opportunity to grow in the project, and it should also be, it's like, okay, well, project manager says, these are the basic things that we need to get, done in this project for this project to be a success. But even that project manager should be looking at an opportunity to either improve the workflow or improve the way that, the communication is or whatever.
But let's talk about the reality here. Let's talk about the reality.
Man, why do you got to do that?
Inside baseball time, Cormac. What do you do when you send somebody an assignment of accomplishing a certain task on a project? Let's just say it's a detail or something. And it comes back not at all like you would expect maybe somebody of their level to have been able to achieve. Maybe they didn't ask any questions. And there's a lot of what you see is a teaching opportunity, or at least, a mentorship opportunity, and you don't have time to do it. Like, okay, so what goes through your mind at that moment? Because I want to talk about the realities of working. I'm going
to tell you what goes through my mouth. Forget my mind, because I've learned through so much trial and error that when I'm assigning somebody a task, they may have never done it before, or they may have, they may be a master at it. I hate that I ask, is like, do you understand what I'm asking you to do? Or can you summarize what I'm asking you to do? As just like, but please understand, if you've never done it before, this is the time to ask how we accomplish it, what the expectations are. Do you need me to go through? Do you need me to show you examples? Can you do it with maybe me giving you examples? I will try to set them up for success first, and not try to set them up for failure. I've done the opposite. You're not just throwing them in the deep end and saying, "Hey, I learned the opposite." And you've heard me say, it's like when somebody assigns somebody a task and they have a desired outcome of what that task should be. I mean, I've heard so many times, well, they're 15 years in their career, they should know what to do. But I've seen people who are 15 years in their career who know exactly what to do. And then they do it the way that they think is the right way to do it, and then still get chewed out for not doing it the way the expectation was. Mm-hmm. And then I asked that person with, the so-called, like the anger from the expectation. He was like, did you explain to them exactly what you wanted? It's like, well, no, they should have known. Mm-hmm. I was like, no, they knew how to do the job exactly the way that they've done it before in the past. And in what I see they've done is right. It's just not the way you wanted it.
So if you want super common.
So if you want it, oh, absolutely. So I was like, so if you want it done the way you need it done, either you do it yourself, or you tell them how you want it done, or how you would do it, so that it gets to, it meets that expectation. Yeah. Otherwise, if it is done and it is correct and it meets, like, let's just say that, it's a warranted detail, warrantable detail and all of that other stuff, what's the problem?
Now, what happens when you give that assignment and you set them up for success, and then it still comes back as crap because not because they didn't ask. Well, yeah, because they didn't ask you. Because they said, I've got it.
I had that very issue with a junior, emerging professional, and he was very uncomfortable with feeling like he didn't know what he was doing, and also was just he didn't like that other people thought he didn't know what he was doing. And so when they would assign him a task and they said, well, let's give you a deadline of a week to get this stuff done, and then at the end of the week, let's get together. Or in my case, it was just like, okay, I've got this and do. I need you to do this, and this. Do you understand? Yeah. I've got it. I know what I'm doing. Okay. And then he'd come back, oh, you don't know what you're doing. And there was a couple of times where, I just kind of like let it pass. I was like, okay, well, I'll either fix the detail or I'll have somebody else fix the detail, and then, look for an opportunity to maybe like, pull him back a little bit and stuff. And then, but on the one project, my overseas project that was just so fast tracked, sometimes I couldn't come back and check all the time. And so there was a lot of times where there's a little bit of frustration festering and all that other stuff. And I decided, I'm like, look, this isn't the right way to be treating this guy. This is not the right way to teach this guy. And like, let's have the conversation with him. Like, look, I don't care if you don't know what you're doing. In fact, I expect you to not know what you're doing. What I expect you to do is ask if you need help and recognize that you need help and feel confident in being able to ask the question and not feel like you're going to get berated or, treated poorly because you don't know the task that you were given. That was, to be quite honest with you, that was like the turning point for both me and most certainly for him. Me as in understand that when you assign something, no, not everybody understands what you're asking them to do. Make sure that you have that conversation with them. Be there for the support, regardless of how, crazy the schedule is and everything else. It is your job at the end of the day. It is your responsibility to make sure it's all done right. And if you're tasking somebody else to do something, you got to make sure that they can do it right. And the only way that they can do it right if they've never done it before is do you use that as a teaching and mentoring opportunity to teach them how to do it. So trust me, I've lived through it. I've experienced it on my own, on my own. The thing that I loved about one of my very first employers, in fact, actually the very first employer after graduation, he basically, I would say, hey, Mike, can you show me how to do this detail? He's like, you got a lot of books around you, graphic standards, you got, the suites catalogs, and you've got all these different manufacturing details. Try to pull together the detail as best as you can and then bring it down to me and, we'll walk through it together. And rather than him just like going off on the handle saying, oh my God, Cormac, this is absolutely the worst thing that I've ever seen. Why did you draw it this way? This is trash. He basically said, okay, here's where, you went wrong. Here's where this detail does this. Here's where the waterproofing does this. And this is why, this is to do this. And had the patience to sit down and teach me how to like go through all these things and learn from my mistakes and learn and really remember how we always talk about is like, what does that one line mean? That line means something when you draw it. He took the time to actually sit down and say, this line, this shows the waterproofing. If you put this line here, then, here's the path of the water and it's getting into the building and now your wall is leaking. But if you put that line here, guess what? It's keeping the water out. And it's just the simple little things like that. Just show them like, oh, okay.
Don't you feel though, like the profession used to have more opportunities for that kind of thing to happen? And I hate to say like this happened to us because on some level we're responsible as well, right? Or even probably more than half of the percentages. But the thing that is hard to come by nowadays is the time to do that, let alone the attitude and the willingness to do it, but the time.
Well, one of the things that I heard, and this is, this could be like the old timer comment and stuff, but one of the old timers, in fact, that
Wisdom.
boss,
Wisdom.
Well, so Mike came up to me and he was just like, one of the things that I really don't like about, this switch from hand drafting to CAD is like when you were hand drafting, I saw everything that you were working on your table. I could walk up and take a look at it, and we could be able to like sit there and look together at everything that you're working on. He goes, right now, everybody's zoomed into one little thing, and I'm just seeing like a bunch of little lines and stuff like that.
Context,
and then I say, hey, let's zoom out and all that other stuff. So we don't really get a chance to see the same things that we used to see all the time, And so we're so like, in this like, blinders on, tunnel vision, staring right at like the little things that we don't really, how much do we take time to first ourselves zoom in and zoom out, see the macro view and the micro view, and then keep going back and forth with that. But then also have other people to look at the macro view and the micro view together and say, oh, hold on. I just noticed that this was, doing this, and what it really needs to do is this. And, so like there's not even that like level of kind of communication because we're in such a rush to get things done that like, even the simple QAing of your own work sometimes, falls by the wayside.
Yeah, you're talking literally about coordination, right?
Right.
And coordination is a macro job and it's a micro job. And
exactly.
And when you are coordinating conditions on a project, on a detail sheet, to a wall section, to a detail, it's like you got to take all that into account. And here's a huge issue with BIM is coordination is done much more for you, right? Well, coordination is difficult. Like, let's be honest, there's been a lot of things that have gotten missed because you moved a thing over here, on the elevation, and then nothing else updated automatically. You had to go back with your eraser shield and your pencil and redraw it, right? And that now is solved, and it's solved at various levels, but not all of them, right? And so it's actually made us unintended consequence lazy in that regard, which is the same thing we're seeing nowadays with AI and LLMs, right? Which is accepting the output as it's probably fine, right? It's not something I'm going to spend time checking because it's probably fine. And I'm just saying, like, this has happened slowly over time.
I'll give you this weird little example that I just saw yesterday on that construction tour that I was telling you about. So we're standing outside, the project manager from the architect side, as well as somebody from the contracting team. They were out there and they were talking about all these projects and stuff. And I'm typically always in the back anyway, because apparently I've got facial expressions that I can't hide things.
You can't be front and center.
I can't be front and center.
You've said too much with that facial expression.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm sitting in the back, and I was happened to be talking to this one guy that I had met yesterday, and he saw this look on my face. He's just like, "What are you thinking?" Or he was like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, I was like, I don't know if I can give you this, this big grand assessment of everything, because I'm hyper focused on that, fire department connection right there. And he like looks over, he's like, "What about it?" And so there was this one little facade, and it had these 3 recessed panels of brick inside, so like the whole thing was brick. And then there was like, let's just say 2 courses of brick that were proud. And then 2 inches back was, a series of two courses that were, recessed. And
like
then then 2 courses, and then 2 courses recessed, and then 2 courses proud. And so, but the thing is that the fire department connection was straddling both of them.
Oh.
And so there was this big gap.
Did they literally say, "What about it"?
They did say, they said, "Well, what about it?" And then I'm like, they could have chose a surface to be on.
Yeah.
Like, do they want to be on the proud surface the recessed surface?
I like how you're giving the option to the connection itself, not the person.
Yeah, and I was just like, it wanted to be somewhere other than where it is right now. And I was just like, I'm just so now hyper focused on that. I was just like,
because
now
it's so wrong.
And before we walked in there, I was just like, now I have low expectations. because that one little detail is just like, are you serious? Seriously, you put that, like, you've gone through this effort of articulating that brick facade, and now you've got this one, like, missed coordination item of a fire department connection that literally now looks so out of place.
Yeah.
And then, you know me, you definitely know me. So I'm sitting there standing. It unraveled from there because now I'm looking at, like, they've got these two different, Alucobond surfaces. And so they've got a whole bunch of panel joints coming together. And some of the panel joints are aligning and some of them are way off. And it is not a mistake, or it wasn't a design decision or something like that. Sorry, it wasn't a design decision. It was a mistake. It was just the fact that they missed the coordinating of all of these things, because then you try to, like, align those joints with, say, your mullions and your windows or the handrails up above, and then, like, the big panel design kind of just keeps pushing off, and it was just like, these are the things that, as we're talking about them, that you zoom out, you zoom back in, you zoom out, and you're like, okay, are these lines exactly where I want them to be? Am I purposeful in the fact that the other lines are just below it in another panel, very similar to it, is now completely way off?
So the thing is, it's like at some level, people are thinking this stuff will take care of itself.
Right. But you don't, like, what you shouldn't be expecting is the contractor to,
we used to
make
be able
those
to
design decisions. Yeah,
we used to be able
yes.
to at least know that we were going to have a conversation about it.
Dave Pruding,
yeah.
he would at least ask the question. Funny enough, so fast forward to today, I had, my contractor for the building in Baltimore. He had texted me a picture, and he's just like, the drawings show for this light to be here, but every other one of your fixtures, your card reader and your strobe and everything else are all aligned. Do you want the light to be shown where it is on the drawings, or do you want it to be aligned with everything else? And so he sent me a photograph, and I'm like, I want it aligned. Thank you for asking. And, that was the symbiotic relationship that we had, because, he was like, yeah, I know you don't really want it there. It looks off. I mean, even to me, it looks off.
Another set of eyes and
another
just a
set of eyes.
Question in real time just solves that issue.
Exactly.
So how does this all relate to the initial question with the emerging professional who's
So in a way, I even asked her, I was just like, if design isn't your thing, do you think maybe, like coordination or management or specifications or, or even marketing or some of the things that are within that you can find a niche to specialize in certain aspects of the project delivery? Does any of that interest you? Above and beyond, just like, okay, if design doesn't really interest you, or like, what is there anything?
Is that what that person is that's their role?
Well, I mean, to be quite honest with you, they're so new in the career that, as you can imagine, what they're being, tasked with is just, either, grunt work, or maybe they're doing something that's like, oh, you were really good at Photoshop. Hey, we want you to do some Photoshop. Or, InDesign. Hey, we've got a report for you to help, pull together.
Yeah.
And so, like, that doesn't give you the broad stroke of, like, what architecture is. And that's why I think, in a way, we do ourselves such an injustice when we immediately pull a recent graduate who may or may not have had some internship, opportunities during school, to just, like, immediately throw them into, hey, you're going to be doing toilet room details, and that's going to be your role for the next, couple of months on this project. Instead of taking the opportunity to say, let's introduce you to architecture. Let me, like, one of my favorite things to do when I, had the opportunity to was, hey, you're new to the profession. Hey, you're new to this firm. Let's go and take you out onto the job site. Let's, like, look at what it is that we're trying to achieve when we start assigning you, the task to draw those toilet room plans, or, do these different details, or, start drawing on a project that you don't even know anything about what it is that we're asking you to do. Let's go take a look at the effects of it all. Like, let's look at a poorly, detailed, or poorly placed FDC and why it matters for you to pay attention and all of these other things, and just teach them the importance of what it is that we're doing. Because again, like if we're, and you've heard me say this so often, it's just like when the default response to a problem in the way that they've done something is that's the way Revit draws it, it's because they don't understand the systems that they're putting together. And so the workaround of like, knowing what the system's supposed to look like, so that when Revit draws it wrong, say it doesn't join a corner or something like that, and you know that that's wrong, but you just leave it that way because you don't know any different. But if you know what the systems are supposed to do because you've seen it in practice, you've gone out on site, you've been exposed to, construction site, you've been exposed to like, the way a good, successful design and, bad design come together and stuff, and you sort of understand the materiality of things. When you actually draw it and Revit can't close the corner, you're like, you know what? I got to fix this because I know that that's not what a corner actually does. But when you default back to it and say, that's just what Revit does, it's because we didn't do enough to educate that person into knowing what it's supposed to actually look like, what it's supposed to actually do,
or how to do it. But
or how to do it.
But I really feel like the big picture here is like finding meaning in architecture or elsewhere.
That's true too.
Because if you're not fulfilled, it is 100% based on the context that you're operating within. Now, there's two sides to that. There's the external context and there's the internal context. Okay, so the internal context we spoke a little bit about with attitude, direction. It can be boiled down to just a very small number of things, right? It's like, how are you approaching the day and where do you want to go? How are you letting people know about that? How are you taking steps to get there? But that external one, I think you have more control over that than you might think, meaning you can change it. If it absolutely is out of your control and it's having that big of an impact on you, because you have to have some control over your environment in order to feel like you are making progress. And so that has to do with the people, it has to do with the tools, it has to do with the resources, it has to do with all kinds of things, right? So you have to take an honest assessment, because what you want to do is you want to be able to align to things so that you figure out where your meaning in this world is, and then you will find happiness through pursuing that meaning. It's not the other way around. You don't operate at a happiness level and the meaning happens by itself. Like you literally have to find it. And so that introspection to me, by looking at the data, okay, what's going on inside of here? What's going on the outside? What changes can I make to both of those? It might have to do with, okay, maybe you need to exercise more. Maybe you need to eat differently. Maybe you need to go to bed earlier. Maybe you need to find a job that's closer to you. Like there's all kinds of little things you can do. 100%. And I feel like, man, if you, because you may or may not find that in this profession, and I don't care if you went to school for it or not, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. No one's making you do it, and no one's going to change it for you. So, like, put on your adult pants and let's make things happen, right? You've got to be responsible for your own self and not be a victim of this thing, because complaining about it isn't going to get you anywhere. You got to do something about it.
I don't know if I've ever told you the advice that I usually give to all of the young architects that have ever worked with me. And it's basically something that you and I do all the time. Like, the advice that we give all the time on here, and you just said it, but I summarize it a slightly different way. And it's, you control your own career. You control what happens to you in your career. Don't let anybody else control, your career.
Don't give that power to somebody else.
If you let somebody else dictate your career, you're never going to be happy in what you're doing in your life. It's exactly what you just said. So I can't really I mean, the quick summarization of what you just said, but I just want to put that to the side and say, rewind this for a few seconds, repeat, like re-listen to what Evan just said, because that actually is the point of this. Is like, if you're in this profession and you don't really like it, or you don't like something about it, it's you who has the opportunity and the responsibility to change it for yourself. And it's, if it's going through, maybe it's a health thing, maybe it's an environment thing, maybe it's, this just isn't the right thing, then it's you, not anybody else. Don't let anybody else dictate your career. Dictate it for yourself. That's the only way you're going to be happy.
Yeah. And I will go back to, because you're an emerging professional, like really try to find that here. Unless you absolutely don't think it's worth it. Right. But to Cormac's point earlier, like there's a lot of things that you could do. A lot. And in the profession, adjacent to the profession, outside of the profession, I think that there's plenty of opportunity out there. But yeah, you're the person who has to figure it out.